neighbors
What's going on?
came onto our side and started attacking them. And
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Oliver Lark is in the building.
You look at Saudi Arabia. You look at UAE. He's
going to be joining
Qatar,
our press conference watch.
But they were strong.
And then afterwards,
smart,
I'm gonna hold his feet to the fire.
When I first heard it, I said,
no,
somebody made a mistake.
Some tough questions.
There was no mistake. UAE had over 1,000 missiles.
Welcome to the broadcast.
Knocked them.
We're listening to Donald Trump talk about
on the very first day I came down,
Operation
2015,
Epic Fail, Operation Epstein's Fury.
I will stop Iran from getting
and how wonderful it's been so far.
And all I'm doing
regardless of what the haters and losers are saying.
That was in 2015. I said it. It was a threat then, and a much bigger threat now, but no longer a threat. Not for a long time, anyway. We want to keep it that way as we continue Operation Epic Fury. We're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world. And I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. I will take out those targets that were easy and that I mentioned just before. We'll take them out so quickly, they'll never be able to recover, ever.
So far, it's been
that game.
epic victory.
In the long run, oil supplies
victory,
will be dramatically more secure.
A lot of like IRGC affiliated accounts and like media yesterday was saying that he would declare victory as an effort to like draw back American forces. And once I think he saw the price of the oil barrels go up to like almost $120 a barrel, he very quickly gave an interview earlier today to CBS regime media, claiming, "Oh, we're almost done. We're almost done with the war," and that actually did quickly recover the futures market a little bit. It was a total manipulation, in my opinion, especially considering that there has not been any sort of real scale back on our bombing campaigns in Iran. Israel is still continuing to deploy weapons in Iran, and Iran is still continuing to pummel Israel and also a lot of the regional allies. And the Strait of Hormuz is not open.
Disruption. The United
Lebanon's
States
getting pummeled.
Yeah,
civilians are being murdered in Beirut, and Israel's just using this as another excuse to not only go to war with Iran, but with all of the regional countries that it's bombed 6 countries last year. So this is just yet another excuse. And even today, I mean, the United States purported allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are basically looking at what the United States is doing, and they're not coming to the rescue the way that Trump is expecting. And I think this is just, Trump is having his mission accomplished moment right now with like George Bush on the aircraft carrier. It is insane the way that history just repeats itself. And even someone like Trump, who ran as the purported anti-war candidate, which he never really was. He's a neocon, just like they all are. And he's just he rides the coattails of whatever public sentiment is. So when he criticized the Iraq War, it was only after the fact that it happened. He was just as warmongering as every other neocon freak that this Republican Party nominates. And yeah, it's insane. Rubio as well.
Going there in a short period of time, and we're protecting the world from what these lunatics are trying to do. And very successfully, I might add. We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off until this straightens out. Then who knows, maybe we won't have to put them on. There'll be so much peace.
Which, by the way, has been
But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait
in our foreign policy against Russia, as well as it wages a war in Ukraine. That's what he's talking about when he says, like, all these other countries that we previously forced sanctions on or told to, separate their ties and their energy dependence on Russian oil and gas. They're now retreating on that as well.
If they play that game, we're going to hit them at a level that they have not seen before.
Yes.
So we're winning very
after this is over,
decisively.
I'll introduce Oliver
we're way ahead of
again,
schedule.
Okay?
It's our military is the greatest in the world, with the greatest equipment and the greatest people in the world. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Iran's a very powerful country. They were going to take over the Middle East. If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East. They had thousands and thousands since their last hit. They had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else. Most are now destroyed. But they were going to take over the Middle East. Those weapons were aimed at Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with this. They were going to take over the Middle East, and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing. And
561.
we're
looks
very
good.
proud to be involved in this, and it's going to be ended soon. And if it starts up again, they'll be hit even harder.
Yeah, he's.
Thank you very
This
much for
is-
being here. Go ahead. Any questions?
Oh shit! Oh, this is the best part. This is a crazy
you
thing to
so
say
much.
when the
Do
other
you
side is
approve
completely.
of Iran's new supreme leader? And secondly, can you tell us more about your call with Russian President Vladimir Putin
When
today?
the
What
Iranian
did you
side is like
discuss?
Yes, I had a
operating in
very
a totally
good call
sovereign
with
manner, it is wild
President
to just
Putin.
come out and be like,
A
oh,
lot of people on the line
total
from our
victory.
side, from
They're
his
going to pull
side.
back now.
We were talking about Ukraine, which is just a never-ending fight. And look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the
over soon.
Ukraine-Russia
Well, he
war
said it's
with.
over
I'll be
soon.
more
This is what's
helpful.
going on
But we had a very
in
good
Israel,
talk.
like right now.
And he wants to be very constructive.
Missile
Yeah.
alerts everywhere.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over? Are
No,
you
but
talking
soon.
about days?
I think so.
Oh no, not this week,
Very
but
soon.
soon.
Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels
They
of
replaced
leadership are gone.
Khomeini with Khomeini.
Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very.
This guy,
very
no one's
powerful,
ever
very
heard of him. His
Cuba,
name
you
is
said that Cuba wants to
Khomeini.
make a deal.
But
What would
younger.
the United States get in return for that? And why should Americans trust Marco Rubio to negotiate it?
Well,
Jared
Marco
Moskowitz
Rubio
trusts
is doing a great
Marco
job. I think
Rubio.
he's going to go down as the greatest Secretary of State in
Yeah, get
history.
your licks in, King.
Look at what we've done as a
It's crazy. I mean,
as a presidency. Look at what we've
Don't
done
wanna
as an
interrupt the
administration.
president.
Yeah,
But-
the goat.
They trust Marco.
Yeah,
and
no,
so do
totally.
The American people trust. He's been successful no matter where he's been. He also speaks the language, which is always nice.
Oh,
and
they're
always
talking
helpful.
about the
But he's dealing, and it may be
Operation
a
Reactionary
friendly
Shield in
takeover.
Latin
It may not
America.
be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah,
because
they
they're
trust
really
him. He speaks the
they're
language.
down to,
That's
as they
crazy.
say, fumes. They have no
helping
energy.
another
They have
narco
no,
dictator in Ecuador,
money. They're
Noboa.
in deep
Yeah.
trouble on a humanitarian
Our
basis.
South
And,
American policy is so
we don't want to see that. but
fucking
they were
disastrous.
very,
It
very bad
is
to a lot of people, as you know.
devastating, and we can't even like focus on it that much because we're fucking up the Middle East right now.
At record levels.
No, but Rubio's
Very
Rubio,
important.
Graham,
Those
they're
people are
frothing
very
at the mouth
important
over
to me.
Cuba
I know what
Yeah.
they
right
went through.
now.
They went through hell. Some of them have gone on to be some of the most successful people in the country. Cuban American business
There we
people,
go.
some of them are like the most successful in the country. And a lot of them are friends of mine because I've been fighting this battle with them for a long time.
The
Castro
fighting
regime
the
was
battle
brutal.
against Cuba.
But they lived off Venezuela. Now they don't live off Venezuela. Sends them no energy, no fuel, no oil, no
Venezuela
money,
sending
no
it to
nothing.
Israel now.
They lived without Venezuela. They couldn't have made it. And we cut them off from everything else. So, yeah, they're going to make either a deal or we'll do it just as easy anyway. Yeah.
Whenever they say,
Please.
like, one of the most devastating words that a sequence of words that you can hear from an American leader, especially this one, is "we're doing a deal with them." Because time after time, I mean, they had a phone call with Maduro 8 days prior to the kidnapping, right? And we all know what the negotiations process looked like twice now with Iran. So this, for me, is terrifying because I have a personal stake in this a little bit as well, right? I'm going to Cuba soon. And it's. I mean, I don't know. It's just like one of the cruelest, endless policies that we have.
But that's being investigated right now. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country.
Oh,
But
we're
they
nation
certainly-
building
they
now.
have no navy,
Oh,
they
yeah,
have no
that worked out
aircraft.
so well.
Regime
They
change
have
and
no
nation building in Iran.
anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no
don't-
radar. They have no telecommunications.
This shit pisses me off
And they have
so
no
much 'cause, like-
leadership. It's all gone. So, you could look at that statement.
George W. Bush with a spray
We could
tan.
call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Oh,
But,
so it's not over.
The big risk on that war has been over for 3 days. We wiped them out in the first 2 days. When you think about it, it's
Gonna go
incredible.
back
We
to this
wiped
real
out a
quick.
big navy, very powerful navy. You know, these were ships. These were serious ships. These were
Literally
ships
none
that you
of their
buy
naval assets,
when you
none
want
of
to
their
win
large
battles.
naval
They're all,
assets are relevant in this.
they're all on the
Most of
bottom
the
floor.
naval
The
assets they
sailors were all
bombed on the
running off
first
the
day
ships
were
and
already
refused to get
parked
on
on
the
the
ship.
docks. Like they didn't have
The Air
people
Force
in
is
them.
gone. Everything's gone. The missiles are down to a trickle.
The real
Down to a trickle.
The real Iranian
Probably
Navy
25%.
is the Go-Fast boats that they have.
And they'll
they
soon be
haven't
down to
actually been able
nothing.
to
We'll
strike
have
those.
where they manufactured the drones are under fire as we speak. They're being hit. So the rest is going to be a determination as to my attitude, along with the people in the Trump administration, what we want to do. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Can I ask you, you mentioned you were going to waive certain additional oil waivers or sanctions. Can you talk a little bit more about that and address in particular?
Well,
are
we're
you
looking to
considering
keep the
measures
oil
like-
prices down. We went artificially up because of this excursion.
Israeli
into
chatter says while he's
a very
talking, we get
positive
sirens
thing.
over and
This
over
was an
again.
excursion
Fucking
a lot of
liar.
people wouldn't have done. I knew oil prices would go up if I did this, and
No, he's got
they've
this.
gone
Him
up
and Bibi got
probably
this, bro.
less than I
Don't
thought
worry.
they'd go up. But I don't think anybody thought we were going to be this quickly successful. This
said
was
artificially
a
the oil price
military
went up.
success, the likes
Artificially.
of which
Was it the
people
largest
haven't
oil
seen. We
spike
have the
since
best
2008
military. We
with
have the best equipment.
Lehman Brothers? Yeah.
We have, I believe, the best generals. We have the best, and this went very quickly. We
I love
talked
when they
about
do
that
this
with
thing where it's like,
President
oh,
Putin.
well,
He was
you're not
very
shitting
impressed
on me. You're shitting
with
on our
what he
beautiful
saw,
generals,
'cause
actually.
Nobody's ever seen anything quite like
Okay.
it. You know, Iran was a very powerful military country with all of the missiles. Now, you had the double attack. You had the original attack with us and Israel, and that knocked them for a loop. Then you had the B-2 bombers, which took out their nuclear capability, and they
love
would
this
have had
image.
a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And they would have used it long before this press conference.
They would have had a nuclear weapon
And
2
we
weeks
might
to
have had
4
a much
weeks.
different press conference if we had a
He
press
is literally
conference
Benjamin
at all.
Netanyah's flesh puppet. Like he is
But
just
it's
like
been
saying
amazing.
everything that they've
the
told him in
military
those rooms.
success that we've had is truly unprecedented.
2 to 4 weeks away for 30 years.
Yeah.
You've told your congressional colleagues that you will not sign any piece of legislation until the Save America Act is passed. Does that include the confirmation of Senator Mullen as your next DHS secretary? Does that mean a DHS funding bill? And Senator Thune said today it's not a matter of whether or not your Republican colleagues agree with the policy. It's about changing the process. In other words, getting rid of the filibuster to get there.
So in order to get it, you're going to need Democrat votes. And what we're saying is the Save America, not the SAVE Act, which nobody knew what it was, the Save America Act. The Save America Act. And that's voter ID. We want voter ID. We want to be able to see a picture of the voter. We want to be able to see that the voter is legitimate. We want, very importantly, confirmation that this
my
voter
God.
is a citizen of the United States of America. And we want no mail-in
Literally,
ballot
it's a
scams.
problem that doesn't exist. It's a
So
problem
we
that
have
was purely
exceptions for the
invented. It's
military,
identical
for
in
sick.
many respects to the whole like immigrants are doing crime narrative. Again, no evidence for this whatsoever. There have been a million different independent and also partisan studies conducted on this issue on whether or not undocumented immigrants are actually voting, or there's like tremendous amounts of voting fraud that's taking place in the United States of America. And time after time, they found no evidence whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, I think the most comprehensive study conducted was by the Heritage Foundation or the American Enterprise Institute, one or the other. I can't remember right now off the top of my head. And they found 1,200 instances of voter fraud. 1,200 instances of voter fraud over 30 fucking years. Okay? And they weren't all Democrats, as a matter of fact. Many of them were actually Republicans. Ironically enough, whenever they do, oh, it was Heritage, thank you. Whenever they do these kinds of studies, these comprehensive studies, what they end up finding is like a lot of the high profile instances of voter fraud are unironically fucking Republicans. And when they're actually arrested for it and asked, like, what the fuck were you thinking? They go, this happened in 2016. Where a Trump supporter was like, well, I had to do it because the Democrats were doing it. So I had to counteract the Democratic voter fraud by doing voter fraud myself. So like this notion that there is tremendous amounts of voter fraud taking place in this country is so idiotic. It's never existed. And before people say this is Trump, this is classic Trump, no the fuck not. Even Paul Ryan had indicated that voter fraud was taking place in California. This has been an ongoing Republican lie. Even the smart Republicans and the reasonable Republicans have also conducted this lie as well. They've leaned into this lie as well. It's a part of the GOP playbook to justify voter suppression, which is the real problem with elections.
Yeah, I mean, in companion to everything the Supreme Court has done since Shelby County v. Holder in 2013, removing federal pre-clearance, that really has just instigated the past 12, 15 years of complete voter suppression. So it is it's another classic case of Republican projection, as so many of these things are. They're
Yeah.
afraid of the voter fraud, that they're creating their own incentive to have their supporters commit it when it's statistically insignificant on a macro level.
Yeah.
That have happened that have been very bad. A lot of them came in during the Biden open border period, but we have them under, we've got them, we're watching every single one of them. Yeah, we know a lot about them. The biggest problem we have is the Democrat shutdown. We know a lot about them, but the shutdown doesn't allow us to do what we have to do.
Do you have to take him out? Does he have a target on his back?
You mean the new Supreme Leader? You mean the son?
How can there be an Iran with
Well,
another
I don't want
Ayatollah?
to say that, but I was disappointed because we think it's
I
going to
thought
lead
the
to
clerics
just more
would
of the
come
same
to me.
problem for the country. So
I
was
found the light of
disappointed to see
Allah.
that
I am Shia now. I say Ya Ali every morning, and they won't ask me for
you said
my
you have someone in
take.
mind to be the new
I've read
Iranian
all
leader,
the
but not the
surahs.
Ayatollah's son.
Mashallah.
What are you looking for in
Yeah,
that person? Are you
he
looking at
has
someone
found the light of
internal, given
Allah.
that
He
you
has
just
found
said that
the
their
light of
leadership has been
Islam.
I like the
wiped
idea
out?
of internal and eternal, come to think of it. But I like the idea of internal because works well. I mean, I
Kid
think
Rock.
we've proven
I
that
wanted
so
Kid
far.
Rock to run the
In
country.
Venezuela, we have a woman, Delcy, who has been, president of the country, very respected, she's doing a great job.
That hurts my soul.
And it's, no disruption. We had, as you remember, Iraq, where everybody got fired. The military got fired, the police got fired, the politicians got fired. There was nobody. And you know what they turned into? ISIS. And we don't want that. We don't want that. So,
this is the part of
I would
Trump's
like to see people that are inside
messaging that
now
is
they
correct
talk about
too.
the
Like
son of the Shah.
if there's going to be
They talk
intervention,
about other
Venezuela
people,
is
but,
the better
hasn't been
case
there
scenario.
many,
It's like
many years.
tactically much smarter to do what he
We
did in
have a
Venezuela as opposed to like
formula
what
that's been very good
Iraq turned
so
into.
far, and I think
But
it'll
of course,
continue to be
when
good.
you
The
meet an
relationship is
immovable
extraordinary with
object
Venezuela.
like the competent Iranian state, regardless of like the repressive nature and whatnot in their domestic affairs, like it is clearly a very different type of country. All of a sudden, you can't do that. You can't just do like a swift decapitation and then turn around and just be like, all right, we're doing regime change now. We're going to cut a fucking deal, especially when the other party involved is Israel, and Israel doesn't want any regime change whatsoever. Israel wants a failed state. So that's what the issue that he's running into here. If he had the opportunity to pull a Venezuela in Iran, he would have taken it most likely. Not that like the Iranian government was willing and interested in doing some sort of like regime change anyway. But Israel is the real spoiler here.
Suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that.
Oh
when
my
he was asked,
God.
standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it.
Oh
I
my
think
God, who
it's
the fuck is this
something
guy?
that I was told is under investigation.
It's a ballsy question.
But tomahawks are.
He's about to get
are
tomahawked
used by
himself,
others, as
dude.
you
They're
know.
going to pack him up.
Numerous other nations have tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report. Yeah, please.
Oh my God, journalists do that all the time. Oh my God, do that all the time,
In
please.
many ways, but we haven't won
A real shame for all the fucking career reporters that don't ask
Where
questions
they're
like
not
that, by
going
the
to
way.
be starting the following day to develop a nuclear weapon, where they'll look at that man and some other people from the administration and say, all right, we're not going to do it. They were not willing to say that. And when Steve called up and he said that to me, I said, well, here we go. Let's do it the hard way. But the hard way, I think, is probably the easy way. When basically I can see that they will no longer have any capacity whatsoever for a very long period of time of developing weaponry that could be used against the United States, Israel, or any of our allies. We have great allies in the Middle East, great countries that are allies. And they were staying out of it until they got hit. Someday they'll have to do a story, why did he do that? Why did they do that? But they were going to hit them. If I didn't hit them first, they were going to hit our allies first. I believe, upon
It's weird because they
information
weren't
and
doing
belief,
that before
but
they
I
got
believe
bombed.
that he
So
was
it's, like,
going
very
to.
strange that
They were going to take over the Middle East. They were looking to take over.
Even
the
from
Mid-
like the logic that they're trying to present here, like it is a total and utter fucking defeat because they weren't closing the Strait of Hormuz. They weren't bombing the American bases in the Gulf. They weren't bombing Israel. And they only started doing the worst possible scenario from our perspective after we started bombing them and we engaged in a decapitation
missiles were
strike.
aimed at various countries. And when you look at over 1,000
fucking
missiles
failure.
shot at like UAE, they were looking to take over the Middle East. We got there first. We're lucky. I'll tell you what, the Middle East and those countries, very rich countries, are very lucky that I was president instead of somebody else.
Yeah, this is basically it. The reason Iran is a geopolitical threat is because they could block the Strait of Hormuz and cripple the world's economy, something they have never done. So we bombed them until they did that. Is literally the fucking is the attitude from this administration is so stupid.
I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic. But I felt it was something we had to do. I didn't feel we had a choice. If we didn't do it, they would have done it to us. I felt, based on the negotiations that were being had by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco and Pete and everybody was involved, I felt that they were looking to tap us along before they hit, and I thought they were going to hit. And if they hit us first, that would have been a very bad thing. In the back, please, in the back.
The only countries that do this preemptively are the United States and Israel.
Yeah.
About the Strait, you mean?
It's total violation of all fucking
I want to keep it open. I want to keep it good. You know, it doesn't pertain to us so much as it does to China. We're really helping China here and other countries.
With the acid rain
because
cloud
they get
that
a
is
lot
blowing
of
over
their
China right now from bombing
from the
the oil
Straits.
depots in Tehran.
But because like the Strait of
look, we have a
Hormuz
good
is like
relationship with
sending
China. It's
energy
my
to all
honor
of
to
our
do it.
allies
Yeah.
in Asia and China as well. That's what he's like. Oh, we're helping China.
Have
It's like,
called
bro,
him
you broke
an
it. You broke
unacceptable
it.
Choice. So does he have a target on his back? And how can you say
I don't want to say whether or not he does because that would be inappropriate. But hey, look, I had a target on my back because, as you people wrote pretty well, they caught the assassin that was after me. So we just got them first, but they caught the assassin. They have him now in custody that was after me. So, you know,
Ryan Ruth.
People don't like to mention that, but they did catch him. And I'd like to
He was
congratulate our
Iranian.
military, Secret Service, FBI, all of the people that worked on that, but they did. Yeah, please.
It's not lost on me that every single person that has tried to kill Donald Trump has at some point either been a Trump supporter or directly voted for Donald Trump, including, but not limited to, Ryan fucking Ruth. It's crazy. There was the other Mar-a-Lago guy, the attempted one. Again, another Trump supporter.
Very menacing.
Trump supporters keep trying to kill Trump.
They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. They have a great, I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And right now they're in a system that only allows failure. And I don't want that. And I want a system that's not going to be attacking us. We want a system that can lead to many years of peace. And if we can't have that, we might as well get it over with right now. Yeah, please.
What does that even mean?
As of today,
that
there have been
logic?
8 U.S. military fatalities associated with the war in Iran. How many American deaths are you willing to have in this war?
Oh my God.
Well, as I said before,
What is happening to the
when you
media
have
today?
conflicts like this, you always have death. And I was at Dover yesterday. I met the parents, and they were unbelievable people. They were
Look,
unbelievable
I'm not the biggest fan of
people,
Barack
but they all
Obama
had
either.
one
I've been
thing
very
in
critical of
common.
him,
They
but
said
can
to
you
me one
imagine
thing,
Barack
every single
Obama
one.
responding like this?
Finish
Like, what
the
would
job,
be
sir.
the results
Please,
of
finish
Barack Obama
the
being
job.
like, yeah, you know, people die sometimes?
I'll leave you at that. Thank you
Fox
very
News
much,
would be
everybody.
Going
Thank you.
completely apeshit.
Oh my God! Speaking of Fox News, okay, did you see the Fox News coverage where he was wearing the hat when they were doing the dignified?
Oh yeah,
transfer?
and they swapped in the. It's total state propaganda.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then they apologized for it after the fact. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes President Trump's press conference. That was a fucking disaster of epic proportions, but obviously I got to do an introduction first once again. Oliver Larkin is in the building. He's a DSA-endorsed U.S. House candidate from Florida 23 and a former Bernie Sanders staffer. The Florida's 23rd district spans parts of Broward and Palm Beach County. You were a former Bernie campaign organizer. You're running as a Democratic Socialist focused on Medicare for all, stronger labor rights, ending America's foreign interventions, and tackling inequality in South Florida's increasingly unaffordable housing market. Your campaign sharply contrasts with AIPAC's #1 foot soldier, Jared Moskowitz. That's how I feel about Jared Moskowitz, particularly on foreign policy and money in politics. Larkin argues that working class voters in the district need a representative willing to challenge corporate power and redirect U.S. resources away from war and towards domestic investment. Welcome to the broadcast. Very excited to have you here, even though Michael from Pennsylvania outflanked me and got a remote interview with you beforehand, but he's also been a big advocate for you as well. Very excited to have you here. You've been doing something that I think other Democratic politicians should be doing, which is you're not holding back on unleashing on your opponent that you are trying to unseat in this primary. You're playing a little bit of hardball. Now, it's probably pretty easy because your opponent is Jared Moskowitz, and he is a particularly unlikable person, especially when it comes to how out of touch he is on the desires of the Democratic base, and how much he has been openly at odds with even the rest of the Democratic Party's caucus initiatives when it comes to Israel. I believe alongside Gottheimer, he was one of the two Democratic congresspersons that immediately came out and were saying that we shouldn't do a war powers resolution when Ro Khanna and Massey were trying to put that together, outflanking the rest of the Democrats, which was unbelievable. But yeah, thank you for coming on. Does it make that easier for you that your opponent is Jared Moskowitz to criticize him?
Yeah, I mean, he's giving me new material. I had plenty of reason to primary him when I first started campaigning. He had already been the first Democrat to join Doge. He had already voted for the Lake and Riley Act. He had already been appointed twice by Ron DeSantis. But as this campaign has gone on, what we've seen him do is not try to tend to his base and show, hey, I'm actually a real Democrat. He's leaning in even further to his Republican bona fides and basically asserting that only a conservative, centrist, moderate Democrat is capable of winning a district like ours. And I think there's a lot of discourse that Florida is somehow different than the rest of the country, or we're kind of uniquely that's right-wing bastion, but people have the same working class struggles and same priorities about Medicare for all and getting money out of politics here. And so we're just leaning into that. And when it comes to running as a stridently pro-Palestine candidate in South Florida, I've seen candidates that have run supporting BDS or supporting Palestinian self-determination in the past, but weren't really saying it with their full chest. And then there's the hit pieces that come out 3 weeks before the election, 4 weeks before the election. I'd rather just own it right now and not try to hide my views. I think that's what there's so many of these underhanded kind of card tricks that Democrats have to try to filter and manufacture their views. And when you talk about Jared Moskowitz being one of the two Democrats, he even called it the Ayatollah Protection Act, which was ridiculous. I mean, but I think that's emblematic of Jared Moskowitz is a totem for the rest of the Democratic Party. This is a much larger critique than just Jared Moskowitz. I think he is kind of on the front. He's the front flank of the Democratic Party when it comes to this neoconservative, neoliberal kind of status quo that they're holding up. But we saw him flip his vote on the War Powers resolution after going out chest out completely. I mean, I don't know how you flip-flop on that after calling it the Ayatollah Protection Act and then saying, oh, actually, I was wrong 2 weeks later.
Well, maybe
they found the other votes. The leadership found the other votes to protect him because they know that he's being primaried, and so they needed to protect him because the Democratic Party, if it's nothing else, it's an incumbent protection racket. No matter how ineffective or right-wing you are, they're all interested in just keeping the money flowing to the establishment candidates. And so I think that's really what we're seeing is that Jared Moskowitz will take those positions that align with the Republican Party, but it's also a problem with Democratic House leadership. And that's why I came out early on in the campaign against Hakeem Jeffries as leader, because I saw him, this discipline that it only moves in one direction. The vote blue, no matter who, when it is a right winger, when it's a former Republican, when it's someone who is anti-trans or anti-abortion or pick your issue, that they're willing to throw the Democratic base under the bus. But it's a much larger critique than just Jared Moskowitz. I think it has to do with the entire Florida Democratic Party, the way that the party's just completely atrophied over the last several years to a worse degree than many other states. But I think what we're seeing now with Democrats having record low approval ratings, even despite Trump being in office, and the kind of generic ballot that you'll see Democrats, maybe a few ticks ahead of the Republican Party, but it's largely driven by the negative polarization. It has nothing to do with Democrats suddenly being more popular because they're still not fighting for Medicare for all. They're still supporting a genocide and apartheid. And so we need something different. That's why I decided to run.
And as a national party, the Democrats are actually deeply unpopular, even though they're supposed to technically be the popular party now as the only opposition party out there. And the reason for that is actually because Democrats, understandably, are ranked and graded by their weakest members, the rotating villains at times, or the people who sincerely want to destroy very good provisions that maybe the party wants to advance or maybe the party promised, right? Whether it be card check with like Mark Kelly and the likes of some of the problem solvers caucus members that consistently find themselves at odds with whatever like the agenda might be, even the agenda of someone like Joe Biden. And Moskowitz absolutely represents that contingency, especially as it pertains to an issue like foreign policy. So I'll be honest, you have a tough battle ahead of you, right? If we look at your district, Florida 23 is a D+2 district, but the general election will be tight. And the district is very white, very wealthy, with a big Jewish population. 29% are born outside of the United States of America. Now, What it reminds me of, however, is the same bargain that Zohran Mamdani represented, same bargain that Zohran Mamdani presented, where the idea that large majority Jewish voting bloc is going to automatically align with whoever is Israel first is silly. It's a failed concept, and Zohran Mamdani proved that, even though there were plenty of people who did not agree with him on the issue of Israel or what his perspective was, they still ended up voting for him. And the reason why they ended up voting for him was because you don't vote for a candidate exclusively on the issue of Israel. You vote for a candidate on all of the other promises that they're making. You vote for a candidate on trust, whether someone trusts you to fight for their values and to fight for their interests. So, what is the 5 policies that you want to be defined by, the Zohran method, if you were to make a plea to all the voters that are listening in right now?
Yeah, I would say number one, it has to start with Medicare for all. I think that is just such an emblem of willingness to take on the entrenched corporate power and the lobbying industry in Congress, with the pharmaceutical industry, with the private health insurance industry. The United States is the largest country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, not to have Medicare for all, universal health care. We also pay twice as much per capita as other developed nations. And we still have a system that allows medical debt to happen, that allows people to, forces them into having to put up GoFundMes when they have cancer. Healthcare in this country is a racket. It's a racket that is owned and controlled by the private health insurance lobby, by the for-profit hospital corporations, by the medical technology companies, by all of it. So I think you have to attack Medicare for all, and as part of a larger system, right? It's not just the public health insurance. It's also the fact that we have such a shortage of healthcare providers, of doctors. We see a graying out of abortion care providers because after Dobbs especially, we've seen the medical schools are afraid to even teach, and residency programs are afraid to even teach these necessary healthcare procedures to provide abortion care and to provide reproductive healthcare access. So I think we need to attack the larger system and not only have Medicare for all system, but we also need to look at having the actual providers also be nationalized to remove that profit motive, because it's such an inflationary aspect of our economy. Healthcare spending is such a massive component of healthcare spending, and it comes from the public sector and the private sector. And it's because even with Medicare, it still has to be supplemented by private insurance. You still have to have vision, hearing, dental insurance. You need oftentimes private mental health care. You need to go outside of your plan to seek abortion care. So I think Medicare for all is the starting point. It's not the end point, but it is the starting point of a truly just and humane healthcare system. I would also say the Green New Deal as number 2. And in my district where I grew up, we have one of the only tracts of coral reef in the entire country.
Something that even Ron DeSantis sought to protect and preserve initially.
And that is something where, again, it's a failure of the Florida Democratic Party, where for years you've got Ron DeSantis being endorsed by the Everglades Foundation. You've got Republicans like Brian Mast in Congress, the guy who some of the viewers may know wears the IDF uniform to Congress. Yeah. But he also runs on being a clean water candidate and someone who's going to stand up to Big Sugar and those entrenched corporate interests that incidentally have contributed about $27,000 to Jared Moskowitz's campaign. So for a Green New Deal, our ecology and our economy are connected in South Florida. When you look at the marine industry, it's literally hundreds of thousands of jobs. The tourism economy, Florida is one of the only states without a state income tax. And it's because we have the great fortune of having a tourism-driven economy that brings so much economic stimulus into our state. But if you're having the seagrass die off and manatees dying in record numbers, you've got coral reefs being destroyed by consistent dredging and coral bleaching of the warming oceans. You've got mangroves being torn up to make room for more beachfront mansions, and it all adds up to a system where South Florida cannot exist without a healthy environment. We have flooding on sunny days. We have infrastructure that literally breaks and spews hundreds of millions of gallons of raw sewage into the environment, into the water system. So we need a Green New Deal. It's also how we provide good jobs. It's also how we provide affordable housing, climate resilient housing. So I would connect this absolutely to Ilhan Omar's Homes for All Act. I would connect it to getting public ownership of the energy economy, nationalizing the energy system to really truly meet the scale of the climate crisis and the urgency of that. We cannot rely on the market to address the climate crisis the way that we need to. I would also look at, in the Green New Deal, things like nationalizing the public transportation industry. Here in Los Angeles, there's Brightline West that's being constructed. That's an extension of Brightline in South Florida, which is the only privatized passenger rail system.
Supposed to be the only. It's also supposed to be high-speed rail.
Yeah, and that is the investment vehicle of our Senator Rick Scott, who, as governor, literally denied public funding, billions of dollars in public funding from President Obama, so that he could then go behind everyone's back and invest in All Aboard Florida, which became Brightline. So I would encompass, affordable housing, energy, climate resilience, all within the Green New Deal. Number 3, we need truly an anti-war party. I mean, we just watched that ridiculous Trump press conference. And there are Democrats who, again, when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Iran, they always have to couch it and
or
say,
even Cuba.
Cuba, especially in South Florida, you'll hear, well, of course, it's a totalitarian regime. They have to couch it that this is also a policy they agree with. They just don't think Republicans went about it the right way.
Yeah.
So we have a two-party system that both parties manufacture this consent for these constant regime change efforts, endless war. We've got AIPAC funding candidates on both sides, even despite AIPAC funding endorsing 109 January 6th insurrectionists in 2022. AIPAC doesn't care about democracy. They don't care about democracy in Palestine, and they don't care about democracy in the United States.
Yeah.
So we truly need an anti-war candidate, because when we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars, and this is also a matter of fact with not just the United States government, the federal government, but in Palm Beach County, it's the largest municipal investor in Israel bonds in the entire world. $1 billion invested at the same time that there's a severe lack of affordable housing. They're literally cutting PalmTran, the public transportation system. So we need an anti-war Congress and anti-war candidates to go in there and to claw back this funding, where we've got $1 trillion in Pentagon budget, and they're still going back for more money and saying, Jared Moskowitz is saying, well, I'm not going to defund the troops by voting against this Iran war budget. They're already funded. They've got $1 trillion. They've got more money than they've ever had before, but there's so much corruption and waste and fraud within the defense industry, within the private defense contractors. We saw Lockheed Martin stock on last Monday, hit an all-time high on the stock market. Jared Moskowitz, as he is going into the media and saying, I agree with Marco Rubio, I agree with Tom Cotton, I agree with Lindsey Graham, they're leading Trump in the right direction. J.D. Vance is too isolationist. He's not right-wing enough. I'm further to the right than J.D. Vance. This is all what Jared Moskowitz is saying as he's investing in the private defense industry. So we need an anti-war Congress, and we need a Congress that is going to stand up for Palestinian self-determination, against genocide, against apartheid in the West Bank. And that's something that we've been doing on this campaign.
All right, what's 4?
Number 4 is we need to abolish and prosecute ICE. And I think it's part of a larger dismantling of the DHS post 9/11 surveillance state that we've seen. ICE in Florida is operating differently than in many other states because Ron DeSantis, our governor, has mandated that there are these 287G agreements. So you're not necessarily seeing ICE agents out in the streets. They're deputized to have the Florida Highway Patrol. At Florida Atlantic University, the campus police department, and at Florida International University, you've got the local municipal police departments that are actually doing the detention and deportation efforts that ICE is doing across the country. It's just more localized in Florida. And so when we've got to abolish and prosecute ICE, that also includes the private prison contractors. When we talk about the $75 billion that was allocated to ICE in the One Big Beautiful Bill last year, that's not all just going to ICE. It's going to the private contractors like Geo Group, the largest private prison corporation in the entire United States, which is housed right in our district in Boca Raton, literally across I-95 from Florida Atlantic University. And we see Jared Moskowitz literally recommending a private prison executive, Adam Hasner, writing the letter of recommendation to the FAU Board of Trustees, which also incidentally includes Geo Group executives, to make a private prison executive the president of the largest public university in our district, at the same time that we've got the Broward Transitional Center, which was where Marie-Ange Blaise, one of the women who have died in ICE custody last year, passed away. That's a Geo Group operated, privately contracted ICE facility. Of course, we've also got Alligator Alcatraz. We've got the Miramar ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations Facility. So South Florida really is the nexus for this detention and deportation regime, and we need to dismantle it. And it's part of a broader violation of our due process and our constitutional rights that's been enabled by this post 9/11 surveillance state that we've seen, and even with things like FISA and Section 702 that allows for surveillance of American citizens if they're in contact with foreign nationals. That is something, Section 702, that was actually produced because the Bush administration was law-breaking and the National Security Administration was spying on American citizens. Congress sees that and says, oh shit, we need to actually legalize that to cover the Bush administration's ass. And Jared Moskowitz actually voted against a warrant requirement in Section 702 the last time the FISA reauthorization came up for a vote. So that's number 4. And then number 5, we need to we have an anti-democratic constitution. And to illustrate that, I just want to give one example from South Florida that I think will illustrate this for everyone. We have in Miami-Dade County, just outside of our district, a local ordinance was passed for heat protections for construction workers. Shade, rest, water breaks. The state preempts that. The state does not allow for municipalities. Republicans love to tell the lie that all the best government is the one closest to you.
Yeah.
And that's why they're continuously trying to defund the federal government. They're trying to give power away from the federal government and try to localize it. But in Florida, that local power is superseded by Ron DeSantis and the regime in Tallahassee. So you've got, if you want to pass any kind of local ordinance or legislation, it is completely preempted by the state government. We had 1.5 million more people vote for abortion rights in 2024 on Amendment 4 than against. But in this anti-democratic, undemocratic system, 42% beats 58%. And we see this replicated over and over again, whether it is the filibuster, whether it is gerrymandering, whether it is just the very nature of the Senate, which is a compromise with slave states, and there are members, former members of Congress like John Dingell, that have called for abolishing the Senate. We really need to look back at Reconstruction and what the promise of Reconstruction was, because it is really in many ways a founding of a new country. It is a fundamentally different country after a worker uprising of giving slaves the franchise, freeing people from bondage. It was an entirely new country. And with the amendments that were passed to try to guarantee a lot of those basic democratic rights, and the promise of Reconstruction was rolled back, and that made the way for Jim Crow. And of course, Florida is one of the states that suffered the most under Jim Crow. So we really need to go at the undemocratic nature of the Constitution, and I think that includes public financing of elections. It includes expanding the House of Representatives. I would really like to take a long, hard look at what the very nature of the Senate is. We need to look at judicial review and Marbury versus Madison, the kind of legislating from the bench that is able to occur, where Congress can pass legislation, but Republicans that have stacked the Supreme Court can basically just veto so many different legislative priorities that are passed. So I think number 5 is just the basic democratic nature of the country, which I hesitate to even call America a democracy right now, because you look at Washington, D.C., it's never been a democracy for Washingtonians. They don't have the same level of representation in Congress. I draw the parallel. In Washington, D.C., people are disenfranchised because they don't have voting representation. In Florida or Texas or other red states, because of gerrymandering, people are also disenfranchised. It just looks differently depending on the state or the municipality you're in. But we really, and I think we're in a moment now where it's not just leftists, it's not just democratic socialists, it is people across the left liberal coalition that look at what Trump is doing and what Republicans are doing, and they know that we need to go further. The status quo and returning to the status quo is not acceptable, because it's going to pave the way for just another fascist to come after Trump and to continue this tug of war unless we really fundamentally change the nature of American democracy. And I think that includes attacking the undemocratic nature of the Constitution.
Yeah. Now that you got through the 5, I thought it was going to be much shorter than that. But I was going to say, go to secureactblue.com, donate OFC dash HasanAbi or underscore HasanAbi, which is the link in the chat that we're spamming right now, if you want to donate to Oliver's campaign.
Let's beat Mike.
Yeah, Mike raised what, 23 grand or something?
Yeah, 23 grand.
It's really fucked up that, we're falling short of Michael from Taiwan. Anyway,
he slid right in there. But too,
yeah.
You had us booked before Mike, and he was like, "Oh, it's easy. Just jump on stream."
This is a link. Jared Moskowitz, in his own words, this is a 3-minute video from my stream. It seems. Did you get your team made this?
Yeah,
I think
this is crazy.
Let's see. Let's take a look. The guy from Florida too, that's like trying to go after.
Let's first get you on the record. Where do you stand? Should there be any cuts to DHS or any defunding of the agency?
So no, I don't support cuts to the agency, and I don't support defunding. Commission, I'm a twice appointed Ron DeSantis Democrat, as my socialist opponent likes to point out.
I did point that out.
On the Patrick Bet David broadcast? Ain't no fucking way.
This is how he's reacting, though. This is like, he says this is what my socialist opponent likes to call me.
Yeah, he's like leaning further and further into, like, this is somewhat of a test district, in my opinion, for like testing out the strategy of whether or not like true left populism could actually overcome what Democrats like to call are these like districts that could go to a Republican, God forbid, I genuinely think you'd have a easier shot in the general than you do within the primary structure, because all the people that are like party loyalists in the primaries, now that attitude is changing right now. Don't know how it is going to work in your district, but like the people that vote in the primaries are like the party loyalists for the most part. They favor the incumbent usually. Having said that, however, because of the overall discontent with the national party, there's a real opportunity right now to make that electability argument and to make sure that this is like a permanent Democratic, like easy seat, not +2, but we're talking +10, +20 even in the general with someone like yourself that has this like broad appeal across the board. But yeah, let's get back to this.
Happy with Elon Musk or Rupert Murdoch owning TikTok? Well, it's better than China.
He's just he is like one of the worst. He is genuinely, truly one of the worst Democrats. Oh my God, I'm so happy they're running against him.
Well, look, what I would like to see actually is a little tougher language coming out of the Trump administration. I'm to the right of this issue to the J.D. Vance Witkoff approach, and I agree, quite frankly, more with Senator Lindsey Graham and probably Senator Tom Cotton. Iran is the weakest they've been in a period of time. Now is not the time to appease them.
No, my team
now is the time to put maximum pressure on them and make sure that we dismantle the nuclear program. It's unacceptable for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We all say that it's unacceptable, but what are we willing to do?
Note
whether
the date
it's
there.
cyber or military.
September 14th, 2023. Oh my
This is
God.
the belligerence before October 7th.
Oh my God.
Interventions have worked. We all know right now the only reason why the centrifuges aren't going up is not because of anything we're doing. It's because the Iranians are not doing it.
Iranians.
Right? And they could do it at any.
Listen to me, okay? If you sit around frustrated as to why the Democratic Party is not fighting back against the Trump administration, or if you're sitting around wondering why when Democrats are in power, they don't actually take the initiative to like roll the clock back on all of the awful shit that all the awful shit that the Republicans do get away with, it's because of people like fucking Moskowitz who fight as hard as they possibly can and make sure that like the Democrats don't actually move the needle back in an appropriate trajectory in our foreign policy, our belligerent foreign policy. That's like, this is what I mean when I say, if you're frustrated by the controlled opposition, it's because of guys like Moskowitz, okay? They are in the pocket of all of the worst corporate entities, all the worst, I mean, even foreign policy, like Israel is in the pocket of AIPAC. It's all of the worst shit that the Democratic Party puts out. It's Jared Moskowitz is the guy who's pushing for it.
Moment. It's not like we have some lever that would stop them. They could do it at any moment. And most likely, we'll find out after the fact because they're so close. So it wouldn't be we could do a preemptive military strike to stop it. It would be post. We would find out that they've hit the threshold, and then it would be, what are we willing to do? The next guy, ain't going to do this.
I agree.
And Trump can't fall for it. Now, he's got people around him. I think Marco is leading him in the right direction. Vance sometimes concerns me because he's an isolationist. But
J.D. Vance concerns me because he's not crazy enough. Bro, you're a Democrat. What the fuck are you saying? Oh my God, this makes me so mad. This clip compilation was designed to give me a fucking aneurysm. I swear to God.
And to save your fingers.
It's just like, it's
Trump's
mind-boggling.
got to recognize it's him or nobody. I mean, that's where we're at when it comes to Iran. Like Trump, don't like Trump. They look at Trump as crazy as they are. Okay, and that works in that area of the region. Otherwise, the Israelis should continue to dismantle that. Any country that chants death to America cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And look, I have vast disagreements, obviously, with President Trump.
What are the disagreements that you have with President Trump, actually? Oh, wait, I know what it is. He's not going hard enough. That's what it is. He's doing Taco Trump like Chuck Schumer. He better not try to do a negotiation with Iran.
Obviously, we had some knowledge that this was going to happen. Probably could have stopped it. U.S. presidents have that ability. President Trump let it go forward, and he got it right. I think maybe more joint military exercises in the Middle East. I think showing maybe the Iranian regime the military capabilities we have in the Middle East by doing maybe some weapons tests out there. They need to understand what we're willing to do, and then we do the diplomacy. Then we sit down with them, and we try to work this out. Don't go into politics.
Oh, this is
Really?
crazy.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Do you have regrets?
Go to Wall Street.
Go to Wall Street. Yeah, be a finance
Go
bro.
to Wall Street. Yeah. Go to Wall Street. Go be a finance bro. Like
Yeah.
do cocaine for a couple of years. Get that out of your system. Yeah. That's what I would tell my 16-year-old
yourself
self.
a
Like, I couldn't ask for an easier thing to, like, silver platter.
Yeah.
Who says that?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, you do have like I said, the district itself might seemingly, in theory, the district itself, the demographics itself, like the expectation is that someone like Moskowitz is actually to be the favored pick here. But I think that that is the old way of doing things. That's the old method of assuming that like this is the real electability candidate when it's not. It's like these are all incredibly unpopular positions that he's taking on over and over again. And it's not even like what the district wants. Like if we're talking about Democrats, if we're talking about like actual Democratic Party voters, this is a deeply unpopular way to go about it. Like it's what 80% of the Democrats are against this. Like who are you speaking to in the primaries? 80% of Democrats are against this. Overwhelming majorities of both the Democratic Party and the independents are against what Donald Trump is doing in Iran. And this man is actively advocating for the Trump line and sometimes even outflanking the Trump administration, it seems.
Yeah, and I would say for anyone who says, well, why would a Democratic Socialist be the more electable candidate in a district like ours, what I would assert is that it is precisely because we have Democrats like Jared Moskowitz representing a district like ours. Let's also put into context, Broward County has the highest Democratic voter registration in the entire state of Florida. When Democrats are winning in Florida, it is because there's high voter turnout in places like Broward and Palm Beach County. And when Jared Moskowitz was elected in 2022, that coincided with the bottom completely falling out. Florida gets memed. There's the Bugs Bunny, saw Florida off from the rest of the continent. But in 2018, Andrew Gillum came within 1 percentage point. Bill Nelson came within 1 percentage point of being reelected and defeating Rick Scott and Gillum defeating Ron DeSantis. In 2020, it was a 3-point margin of victory. The problem is that we have Democrats that are making the Republican arguments for them. And so what I would assert is that our campaign is in there to prevent Florida 23 from being the next domino to fall to a Republican Party because we have milquetoast, chicken shit, status quo Democrats that are doing the Republican Party line. Yeah. We need someone who's actually going to motivate young people to turn out, who's going to motivate labor and progressives to turn out, and someone who's not going to, again, when we've knocked on 5,000 doors since this campaign started. We hit our 5,000th door over the weekend. And when we're having these conversations with voters and we tell them, what do you think about your member of Congress? Did you know that he voted for the Laken Riley Act? Did you know that he was appointed twice by Ron DeSantis? Did you know that he was the first Democrat in the entire country to join the Doge caucus? People are horrified. They're absolutely horrified because the words that people on the doors use, and these are, again, your liberal voters, your committed, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, people who are 65, 70 years old. Of course, we're talking to people who registered after 2016. We're talking to people under 45. But when you're talking to the committed Democratic primary voter, they're using words like authoritarianism, fascism, Gestapo, secret police when it comes to ICE. And then you tell them that Jared Moskowitz is supporting this agenda, and they're completely horrified. And they literally cannot believe that a Democrat would support that. But that's the kind of voter depression. There's voter suppression on the right, and then there's the voter depression on the Democratic Party side when we're putting forth candidates like this that don't actually represent what the base of the party believes or is going to motivate them to turn out to vote. And so when we talk about hitting 5,000 doors, if you're pissed off about what you just saw about Jared Moskowitz, please donate, because I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. I'm not taking APAC money. I'm taking on all of the entrenched corporate interests. And this truly is, if we get the word out, we are going to win. I just want to tease something that's going to be in Politico tomorrow morning. We had our first poll in the district by the firm that polled the Zoran mayoral election in the Democratic primary. And what it's going to show, actually, is that Florida is not all that different from the rest of the country. Floridians do not like to see their taxpayer dollars go to fund a genocide. Floridians do not like to see Trump starting another illegal war with Iran and Jared Moskowitz going hand in glove with the Trump agenda. So I think it's going to be shocking for some people, but for me, it's not surprising because I'm with our volunteers when we're on the doors. I'm having these conversations myself, and it's just, I mean, it's basic logic and just our basic humanity. And I think when we talk about how Florida is this exception because it's got, as you mentioned, one of the highest proportions of Jewish Americans in the country, similar to New York City, there's this flattening that happens with the Democratic Party establishment. There's a flattening to the identity politics and just that kind of naked appeal that divorces people from our own humanity. And this is about our collective humanity, and it is about standing together as a community across race, across ethnicity, and truly building a working class movement. Those Jewish Americans in our district, they're also worried about paying rent. They're also worried about sending their kids to college. They're also worried about going bankrupt because of a healthcare crisis. So this flattening that the Democratic Party does based on identity is really just used to reinforce the status quo and to prevent any kind of new voices from coming forward. But I think we just have to be bold and assertive in what we're saying because most people are with us.
No, absolutely. And when you have a vision in the affirmative, when you actually offer things for people, offer things that people want, even if they have disagreements with you on certain issues, which, by the way, there's no guarantee. Like, just because someone is a Jewish Floridian doesn't mean that they're like Israel first, or doesn't mean that they care about Israel all that much. They live in fucking Florida, okay? They don't live in Tel Aviv. There are plenty of benefits to living in Tel Aviv. The government incentivizes people. The Israeli government wants American Jews to go and live in Israel, and yet they choose to live in Florida. This is something that I stress all the time. Like this, it's this like woke version of dual loyalty that like even Democrats and liberals themselves engage with whenever they talk about this stuff. And they're like, well, all Jews care about is Israel. It's like, well, that's literally not the case. Even if it's like somewhat of a something that they care about to a certain degree, it rarely ever meets like the top 5 priorities because they're Floridians first and foremost. They live in the United States of America. They're Americans. They're American voters, and they care. They have American interests. They have American values. There are things that they care about that's happening in their backyard. And when you identify what those issues are and you seek to solve those problems, they're going to vote for you. Even if they, in the back of their minds, they might be thinking like, oh, well, you know, maybe you and I might have some disagreements on the issue of Israel. Then again, I don't even think that it's as controversial amongst the Jewish voting blocs in general to say what Israel is doing is completely unacceptable. Once again, time and time again, voters have shown, even with the case of Zoran and many other places, and also depending on which poll you're looking at, American Jews are not monolithic at all, and they're certainly not monolithic on the issue of Israel either. All right, but I have some more questions for you. You've brought up a lot of things already. You were very well prepared for this interview because you've already talked to Mike and you've talked to Eric too. And you basically went after in the 5-point plan, like virtually all the questions that I have for you, but I'm going to try to find something I can. One thing that you didn't mention in this conversation, even though I've heard you say this before, is that you want to shrink the military budget.
Yes.
And so the question I have for you is, you vocally supported shrinking the military budget. If you were able to cut 10% of the military budget, which is around $100 billion, let's say, where would you invest that money?
I think we need college for all. The student debt crisis that we have, and the fact that people are, I'm still paying my student loans, and that is basically, debt is used as a means of controlling and disciplining the working class and disciplining the labor market to force that kind of precarity where if you're not actively participating in the labor market, then you could become completely destitute. You could be put out on the street. So we have more than enough money if we cut even 10% of the military budget to invest in college for all. And I would not just restrict that to public colleges and 2- and 4-year colleges. When I spoke earlier about the need for more healthcare professionals, more medical providers, I would extend that to also things like medical school, because in the United States currently, we have such a lack of healthcare professionals, and it's because you either have to assume the burden of even more student loan debt, not just the 4-year undergraduate, but the additional student loan debt of going to medical school, or you have wealthy parents, or again, you have this inflationary aspect of the healthcare system where because people take out hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt, that is the excuse or the justification for these exorbitantly high medical healthcare provider salaries, because people are still struggling to get by because they're paying $1,000 or $2,000 a month in medical school debt. So what I would say is investing in public education for all, vocational school, trade schools, and really making it so that we have the most educated public that we could possibly have, and making it accessible for working class people to go and get an education, because that helps our entire economy. The output of that investment is much greater than what it would cost to provide free public college education to every single American who wants it. So I would say absolutely public college for all. And I think there's a lot of other priorities, but
so you wouldn't cut 10% of the military budget to directly give it to the state of Israel?
No,
cut out the middleman. Okay, I don't know. I mean, I thought like that's probably what I'd be in favor of, but I guess you and I have a disagreement there. It's okay. South Florida has become one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. How do you believe Florida should make home ownership more accessible?
Yeah, I would say the corporate landlords and the private equity that really control the real estate industry in Florida. And this is, again, if people want to look up Lennar Homes, Lennar Construction, their top 3 recipients of their campaign contributions are the National Republican Congressional Committee, the NRCC, and then Jared Moskowitz and Jared Moskowitz's PAC. So he is completely beholden to the private construction industry, the private equity and the corporate landlords. So we we need to remove them from the housing market. And I would say more broadly, when you look at what the Clinton administration did with the Faircloth Amendment, capping the number of social housing units available at the number that existed in 1999, you think about how much the United States population has grown since then and why building new housing is so expensive, because it cannot be directly administered by municipalities. It has to be routed through these nonprofit groups that create a lot of redundancy and a lot of just slows down the process of building new housing and makes it incredibly more expensive. So I would be a strong supporter of Ilhan Omar's Homes for All Act to build 12 million new homes to incentivize home ownership for working class people. The average age of a home buyer in the United States 30 years ago, it was, I believe, 39 years old. Now it's 59 years old. So it's people.
It's got to go older, I think.
Yeah.
It's not old enough. Too young. 59-year-olds don't need a home. They can be permanent renters, I think.
Yeah. So repeal the Faircloth Amendment, pass the Homes for All Act, and ban private equity and corporate landlords from owning the housing stock that they do. And I think we can do that by changing the tax structure of the country and making it so that Airbnbs and these corporate landlords like Invitation Homes, which has tens of thousands of units in Florida, that oftentimes when you're paying rent, you're paying your landlord's mortgage and then some. And so if rent is supposed to be the less expensive option that allows you to squirrel money away and potentially go put money for a down payment someday and to afford a mortgage, we have completely inverted that structure where rent is so unaffordable that Florida Atlantic University ran a poll last fall that found you want to look for a majoritarian position in the state of Florida. More than half of Floridians are considering leaving the state because of the cost of housing and the affordability crisis.
Yeah.
So we have to make public housing available, and we have to make it so that working class people can get into home ownership and build that equity. That is really the hallmark of how you build wealth in America. I think there are a lot of other ways that we can attack the income and wealth inequality gap, but home ownership is certainly one of them.
Switching gears here, let's talk a little bit about foreign policy and immigration. Your wife's family is Nicaraguan and escaped the Ronald Reagan-funded Contra death squads. Shouts out Ana Navarro. What's your wife's story, if you care to elaborate, and how does that guide your position on immigration, especially considering that 29% of your district is born outside of the United States?
Yeah, I just have to shout out my wife, Sandra, who originally asked me to be on the union organizing committee at our workplace to organize with the News Guild. So I knew she was the one then. When she asked me to help form a union, we met through our activism. She comes from the abortion rights movement, working at the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. That's why abortion rights are such a passion of mine, because it's a passion within our household and a priority within our household. But her story, she grew up in Northern Virginia. Her family, her grandmother, who was actually living with us last year and had a small pension from the U.S. Embassy in Managua, as well as her Social Security. And we couldn't get a call back from Jared Moskowitz for his constituent service about finding an affordable place for her to live. So she's actually...
Damn, his constituent services ass too?
Yeah, no, it sucks. So she's actually back in Esteli in Nicaragua because she couldn't afford to live in the United States.
I mean, it's over then. I mean, look, a lot of these Democrats, the bad ones, they stay in power because they at least have like reliable constituent services. Like Hakeem Jeffrey is a great example. This is very popular in his district, very unpopular nationally. But if his constituent services is also lacking, I mean, very weak candidate.
Yeah, and no public town hall since he was elected to Congress and started serving in 2023. So he's just completely inaccessible. But on the subject of Nicaragua, so my wife's grandmother was a bilingual secretary who worked at the U.S. Embassy in Managua during the 1980s. She tragically lost her daughter in the 1972 earthquake. Her ex-husband was a member of the National Guard under the Somoza dictatorship, a brutal, brutal regime. And so when the Contra Revolution, when the Sandinista Revolution happened, there was a lot of suspicion within the U.S. Embassy. And so my father-in-law was drafted by the Sandinistas. And basically the turbulence that Ronald Reagan caused by funding these, again, history rhymes, Iran-Contra. The United States has had a long-held interest in Iran, and it relates to our Latin America policy. But my wife's parents were able to come to the United States in the 1980s as teenagers, and were able to get good jobs at through a USAID company, put 3 kids through college, really living the American dream. And then, unfortunately, they were both let go because of the Doge cuts that Jared Moskowitz helped manufacture the consent for as the first Democrat to join Doge. So there's a great book that I would recommend. It's called Blood of Brothers by Stephen Kinzer. He was at one point the Boston Globe Latin America bureau chief, and then became the New York Times Managua bureau chief during the 1980s and the Contra War. And it's really heartbreaking history and shows the effect of, one, the lies of the Reagan administration. You think that Trump lies. Man, he was not the first one. The Reagan administration and what the CIA did in Nicaragua was completely covered up. And again, just these lies upon lies upon lies as we're funneling money towards these Contra death squads that are really what happens with our Latin America policy, and what happens when Castro comes to power in Cuba, or when the comandantes come to power in Nicaragua, or really with so many other cases. They're not originally antagonistic towards the United States. They're seeking liberation from brutal dictatorships, whether it's Fulgencio Batista in Cuba or the Somozas in Nicaragua. But then the United States brings all this pressure to bear with our military, with the CIA, with funding these far-right death squads and paramilitaries. And it forces these new governments to divert resources that the promise of these revolutions is better health care, better labor protections,
improving
better
literacy, improving literacy rates, improving people's like material conditions.
And the United States brings all this pressure to bear to suck all that money out from those priorities and force it back into national defense. And then it creates the conditions where the United States can say, look at this brutally repressive regime, but they're creating the conditions that incentivize that. And we see it over and over again in so many cases. But that was really the situation with my wife's family and coming over to the United States. And it's Nicaragua is still suffering from U.S. foreign policy, and really it's not the exception to U.S. Foreign policy. It is the rule that we sanction 1/3 of the global economy, 1/3 of the countries in the world. So we don't have this even-handed approach where it's the market and it's all the market. Capitalism is a rigged game, and it is rigged in favor of the capitalists and the people who control the wealth and control the resources. And that's why we see, again, with Venezuela, it's a resource grab. It's with Iran, it's a resource grab. They're trying to take the oil. So this is part and parcel with what the United States foreign policy has been for many, many decades. So again, this is a larger critique. Just like running against Jared Moskowitz is a critique of Moskowitz, of course, but it's a critique of the Democratic Party. But when we also critique United States foreign policy, yes, Trump is a buffoon and he's putting us in danger. And he's murdering millions of people abroad with these policies. It's not just through U.S. airstrikes. It's through the pullback of USAID and all of the global aid that comes in the form of food aid, of nutrition, of vaccinations. And it's really, it extends way far beyond Trump to many other Republican presidents.
And Democrats. And Democratic presidents as well. Like they are, Democrats that came before Donald Trump also set the stage for Donald Trump to basically advance this agenda. I mean, he's a lot more vulgar than the previous administrations in terms of like his ambitions, but in many respects, he's basically just saying the quiet part out loud. Whereas in previous iterations of this kind of destabilization, Democrats and Republicans alike have tried to. Kaya wants to also hear this stuff up close. But in previous iterations, it was the Democrats that either refused to prosecute former war criminals, refused to actually roll back some of the initiatives that the Republicans had taken, and created a perfect environment and a perfect opportunity to normalize the Republican agenda, and then for Donald Trump to come in and seize power and take it to its maximalist position. But I think right now we have a unique opportunity to communicate on this stuff unlike ever before, because after 2.5 years of genocide that Democrats as well as the Republicans back to the hilt, people actually recognize that the democratic process when it comes to foreign policy is not really there. And it's not really there for a lot of other issues in the domestic front as well. So I at least in my own personal experience, have seen it, have seen that it's much easier to communicate with people on the priors that they were made to believe, with the social conditioning, especially even in terms of like things like Cuba, right? Mm-hmm. Our starvation policy in Cuba has been voted against over and over again by every single country in the United Nations for years since the blockade began. And that blockade began, why? Because like you said, Batista was our guy. He was brutal, he was ruthless, and the conditions in Cuba were terrible, but he was our guy, and it was beneficial for our criminal component. It was beneficial for, at the time, like labor unions that were also utilizing the island as a tourism destination, sugar plantations with horrible conditions. And we wanted to punish this country for having a successful revolution against that. And we never stopped punishing this country. And now Donald Trump has taken it to its maximalist position where he's cut off oil after taking over Venezuela and doing this resource grab in Venezuela. We have decided Cuba is no longer allowed to get oil, even from other supposedly sovereign nations like Mexico, supposedly sovereign nations like Canada that previously were sending oil to the island. And we're starving the country. It's pretty fucking ruthless. It's pretty brutal. But people, I think, understand that now better than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Cuba policy is the Republican and Democratic bipartisan consensus on Cuba of maintaining this blockade for decades. It has failed on its own merits. And so what we're seeing now is an escalation because it has failed on its own merits, despite the United States trying to isolate Cuba from the global economy and using that as the notion that socialism is failing because our largest natural trading Cuba's largest natural trading partner refuses to trade with them. And I thought it was interesting that when Mexico decided to send oil to Cuba, that we saw that large blow up with the cartels. Again, when United States weapons manufacturers and the illegal arms trade is largely what is funding the cartels. But there's this reflexive nature that the United States, anytime that there is attempts by other countries to help the Cuban people, the United States goes against that. And ultimately, this policy is just about immiserating generations of Cubans and separating them from their families.
One of the ways that the Cuban government is able to generate revenue for itself in spite of these crippling sanctions and the blockade as unjustifiable is medical missions, right? Cuba will send doctors everywhere around the world, including the United States of America in the aftermath of Katrina. And now Marco Rubio, when he came into power as the Secretary of State, one of the first initiatives that he advanced was to make those medical missions illegal. And for the last year, I interviewed a doctor that had participated in this medical mission from Cuba, who had actually lived in Chicago for a little bit as well. And then when Marco Rubio first said that this initiative was going to be rendered illegal, for a year, they went silent on it. They didn't really fully focus on it. But immediately, as soon as Cuba became the main point of contention for the administration before the Iran initiative, they decided to make it illegal. Like they forced the hand of many countries. Ecuador was one of the first, and then they also told the Cuban embassy to withdraw from Ecuador. Again, unprecedented. And now in Jamaica as well, and in Guatemala as well, these countries were forced to no longer have medical missions from Cuba with Cuban doctors. It's like the harm that we're contributing to is not just to Cuba, but it's also to all these other countries as well, where they rely on these doctors. They rely on these medical missions to help some of the less fortunate people in places like Honduras, in places like Jamaica.
Yeah, and in the Caribbean, a lot of these nations send medical students to Cuba to be educated, and the United States again disincentivizes that and uses the stick. It's never the carrot; it's always the stick to prevent these other countries from developing by utilizing the generosity of the Cuban government. And I think highlighting the Hurricane Katrina example is a really apt one because it shows that there's an ethos of solidarity that exists with the Cuban government with oppressed people all around the world. It's why Fidel Castro sent the Cuban military to Angola to fight against the apartheid regime in South Africa during the war, and that largely led to the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. So, the United States labeled Mandela as a terrorist even into the 2000s because of this affiliation with the Cuban regime. But what Mandela recognized was that Cuba stood in solidarity with the mother country, the mother continent of Africa, which is the origin point of so many Cuban people. So it is the United States, again, bringing this pressure to bear. It is picking and choosing winners and losers, not on the merits of what these countries or these economies have to offer. It is in the political interest of protecting American capitalism and global hegemony of the United States. And it's why we see the United States time and time again as one of the sole votes against ending the Cuban blockade, one of the sole votes against a ceasefire in Gaza. And I think American exceptionalism is used to as this kind of rah rally around the flag, jingoistic kind of appeal to American patriotism. But what that obscures is how far of an outlier we are with the global order when it comes to not supporting genocide or not supporting a genocidal blockade over Cuba, which we're now seeing with the blockade that's occurring, the rationing of oil for education, for medical provision, that hospitals are struggling to even sustain care over cancer patients. And it's, again, if the United States really cared about global well-being and humanity, then we wouldn't be bringing this kind of pressure to bear. But it's the same reason that how is a child in Gaza supposed to have had an education for the last 2.5 years? There are these knock-on effects of U.S. policy that just engenders this kind of oppositional nature to the U.S. and the rest of the world. And because we have this hegemony, because we have the largest military in the world, we can bring that pressure to bear. But I think what we're seeing now with the dismantling of so many of our alliances, whether it's Trump threatening Greenland and threatening the NATO alliance, or now with our supposed allies in the Middle East looking at us askance because of what we're doing in Iran, we're really continuing to isolate ourselves even further. And because there's now a countervailing force in China that is a large economic power, that is a growing economy, that has a growing middle class, we're seeing Canada gravitate more towards China because the United States is becoming so unequal, becoming so dictatorial, that we're no longer the reliable economic partner, where our actions can lead to global oil prices spiking for the entire world.
And China is the one that's like trying to maintain stability by going to Iran and Saudi Arabia and trying to get them to cease fighting against one another in the same time frame. So, I mean, I obviously don't have any issues with China whatsoever, and I believe that we need to chart a new path forward with the way we deal with all powers in the world. What is your opinion on how to do diplomacy with China?
I think it has to be diplomacy without this level of brinksmanship that we've seen from the United States, where we are really what the Trump administration is trying to do. But again, this is the bipartisan consent of U.S. foreign policy, where they're trying to take us into another Cold War against China. And it is the South China Sea. It is increasingly the Chinese economy that is overtaking the United States in many metrics. We cannot have this level of brinksmanship where we're continuing to send weapons to Taiwan and overcommitting ourselves to another war with another global superpower. It is an insane approach to take, especially when China is our largest trading partner.
30% of our trade is with China. It's ridiculous.
It is an economic catastrophe waiting to happen if we're going to get into a conflict with China. So we need to have a multilateral diplomatic approach with these other countries that is fostering global cooperation. War is one of the single largest drivers of man-made climate change and of carbon emissions. The United States military is the single largest institutional emitter of carbon emissions in the entire world. So back on reducing the global military budget, the United States military budget, I think that has to include closing some of our overseas bases. It's also, of course, drawing down our nuclear arsenal when we have...
Well, some of them are closing already.
Yeah.
Without our without us wanting to close them. So
yeah, but I think drawing down our nuclear arsenal, not renewing and continuing to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in nuclear armaments that could never be used, because if they were used, it would be the end of human civilization. So we need to look at how we can cooperate with China and with other large economies on climate change, on electrifying our economy with clean energy, because the Paris Climate Agreement, we're rapidly approaching what the benchmark for that was, and we're so far behind. And I think a few years ago, you would hear, especially on the right in America, well, China is burning all of this coal. We're not going to, what use is it even trying if China is burning all of this coal? But now we're seeing China outpace the United States when it comes to clean energy manufacturing of electric vehicles that are produced at a lot cheaper and more at scale. So it is a foolish endeavor to say that we need to continue this level of brinksmanship with an economic partner that we need to be cooperating with and finding ways that we can both invest in not just making the United States economy 100% renewable, but how we can help the global South with partners like China to really extend these benefits to the rest of the world that bears less responsibility than we do for the climate crisis.
Florida is the Sunshine State, and yet, what kind of initiatives have been made to electrify the grid? This could be an opportunity to also work in tandem with the Chinese state, or at least the Chinese industry as well, especially in the aftermath of the energy crisis that we created, ironically enough, over the last 9 days of pummeling Iran, and then the Iranian government closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is now accelerating this energy crisis. What is your opinion on electrifying our energy grid and focusing on renewable energy instead?
I think we need public ownership of utilities. These investor-owned utilities in Florida, it's Florida Power and Light, owned by NextEra Energy. Ron DeSantis is ombudsperson that looks at the rates that Floridians are paying, actually recommended that FPL cut their rates by hundreds of millions of dollars, but because they fund both political parties, including Jared Moskowitz, they got a $7 billion rate hike with no questions asked. So they're raising our rates. They're making energy more expensive. And so when we talk about a global Green New Deal, not just within the context of the United States economy, but how we work with our global partners, this is about making energy more affordable and more accessible to all of us. And it's Florida Power and Light, it's Duke Energy, it's Southern Company, it's so many of these energy companies that buy off members of both political parties. We need to get the investor-owned utilities out of the energy market. We need public ownership of our utilities because that is how we can cut out these subsidies for the fossil fuel corporations. We need to invest at a state level in renewables. And of course, in Florida, where we see Florida politicians will say no drilling off the coast of Florida, but if you do it off the coast of Louisiana or Georgia, have at it. That's a recipe for disaster. So we need to ban all fossil fuel extraction, and we need to incentivize this production of clean energy by having state capacity to do it, not just relying on the market. Because again,
that's good state jobs as well that come along with that.
Yeah, and government work and state jobs is how we can establish a floor for more of a middle-class life. When Trump talks about how the job growth since he became president, and we just saw that loss of 92,000 jobs in February, so even that is failing on its own merits. But he said that there's been zero growth in the public sector. But public sector jobs is how you can establish strong labor unions, strong worker protections, higher wages and benefits, and establish that floor that the private market has to compete with, because if they don't have a competitive balance in their wages and benefits, then people will just say, well, why not just work for the state and I can have a solid middle class life. So I think we need to raise the standard of living by investing in public sector jobs, and that strengthens labor unions. It strengthens worker protections. We're running a campaign that is unions for all, because labor and our labor power, especially in this current context where in Florida, of course, Republicans have supermajorities in the House and Senate and the governor. And then in Washington, D.C., Republicans control both the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. Labor and unions are one of the only existing levers of power to extract real material concessions and real economic gains. It cannot simply be a singular track of we attack this legislatively. That is not enough. We cannot be reliant on electoral system. I know I'm an electoral candidate, but we need strong labor unions and labor protections and that labor militancy that allows for public sector workers' right to strike, which is something that we've talked about. The first public sector union strike in Florida was the teachers union in 1968 that went on strike. The Florida Constitution that very same year outlawed public sector workers' right to strike because they saw when tens of thousands of teachers went on strike for unified economic demands to hire more teachers, to raise the standard of living, to invest more in our public schools. That's real power. That labor militancy is how working people can exercise our power and extract real material concessions. And so I think, again...
And you need that as well to go along with your agenda in order to accomplish these goals that you're setting forward. It might come across like radical, or it might come across like it's too far-fetched, but the reality is these things are achievable, especially when you're working alongside organized labor to apply pressure at times when there is any sort of like corporate-backed opposition coming your way.
Yeah, and we have on May 1st, 2028, Sean Fain and the UAW and other labor leaders have talked about aligning union contracts to expire on May Day 2028 to have to create the conditions for a nationwide strike. And we're going to need labor allies in Congress that can work in tandem with labor and with organized unions across the country to, in the midst of a presidential election in 2028, extract those real material concessions, not just to apply pressure to the Republican Party, but to make sure that the Democratic nominee is a nominee that is a labor candidate that is going to stand with organized labor, so that we don't have this rotating villain of Mark Kelly with the PRO Act saying, oh, I can't do it. There cannot be time and time again when there's always an exception, whether it's Mark Kelly with the PRO Act or whether it's Kristen Sinema with the $15 wage, the exception becomes the rule. And when time and time again, the Democratic Party has these candidates, these elected officials that it allows to completely tank the Biden agenda or any kind of Democratic agenda, that is the rule, because Democrats then refuse to use their bully pulpit. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, they don't talk about applying pressure to the members of their own caucus. They just reflexively say, well, this is what they need to do to get elected in their state. And so that's why we need organized labor as a parallel power structure to the electoral power structure to really extract these material gains and concessions. And to bring it back to energy, labor is also how we're going to be able to push for these incentivization of public ownership of the energy industry, because we need a clean power plan. We need to we need a New Deal FDR style investment in state capacity to produce energy that is publicly owned, that is affordable for people, because energy is necessary for human life. It is necessary for our economic growth. And we're seeing now with the effects on the market with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz that we cannot survive as an economy without self-sustaining energy resources. And so fossil fuels are a finite resource. It is insane to think that we can continue to rely simply on fossil fuel extraction for our economic growth. We need to incentivize other forms of energy to bring us back. We're in the midst of a Holocene extinction, the sixth extinction in the history of the world, and it is the first that is driven entirely by man-made climate change. And I think that is the framing and the context. We are in the midst of a global mass extinction event. And if we do not change, then humanity may be able to adapt with technology and survive, but our quality of life is going to continue to diminish more and more greatly. And it has to stop somewhere. And that's the line that our campaign is drawing.
Also, guys, if you're wondering how you can help out with Oliver's campaign, where you're like, oh, I'm not in the district. One, you can engage in phone banking. Two, you can also go and donate to his campaign as well, especially considering that all the candidates that I bring, with the exception of like Tom Steyer, who's a fucking billionaire, but the candidates that I speak to are not taking corporate PAC money. And on top of that, given their positions on a lot of issues, like Israel, for example, they have a tremendous amount of money that will be spent to make sure that they don't win. AIPAC being one of the major targets here, which is precisely the reason why candidates like Oliver need your donations more than anybody else. Okay, there won't be like a savior pack out there that's going to come out to help them. Then also on top of that, you can go and door knock and engage in ground operations as well, right? Like you need people to volunteer for the campaign too, right?
Yeah, we're going to plan to knock on 80,000 doors in the district between now and our election, which is on August 18th. We just crossed that 5,000 threshold. We've been knocking on doors since November. We're scaling it up rapidly. So your donations help us hire a full-time field director. This is a DSA-run project. My campaign manager is co-chair of our Broward DSA chapter. He was formerly the labor working group chair. Our field director is Felipe, is a DSA member in Broward. Our video team, Janae and Gabriel, are DSA members of our Broward chapter. And so much of our capacity comes from running as a committed Democratic Socialist in South Florida, but it does take resources. We just saw Nita Alam come within about 1,200 votes, less than 1%. And that is with a campaign that launched maybe 3 months before Election Day. We launched 13 months before our election because we knew that it would take time, especially as a first-time candidate, for me to establish that ground game, for me to have the level of conversations that we needed to have. But we need to hire a field director. We need to open a campaign field office. And these are costs that are thousands and thousands of dollars a month. I'm not sure where we're at now, but we had our best fundraising day when we went on stream with Mike on Thursday. I'm hopeful that when I get off, I left my phone and everything outside, so I'm going to find out once we're done here.
He's cooking us still. I think he raised, what, 23,000 that day when he was on?
About 550 people chipped in, so I know that with the number of people watching now, we can, we can change the nature and the character of this election.
Open your fucking wallets, chat. What the hell?
Because
We're at 13,712 that's raised so far. It's disastrous. Disastrous number.
Thank you to everyone who's donated. To everyone else who hasn't donated, we need you to chip in because this is, and I'm telling you, with this poll that's coming out tomorrow.
What's the max that you can donate?
$3,500.
$3,500?
Or $7,000 for the primary and general.
Okay.
If you want to bank it, that we're going to make it past Jared Moskowitz and elect.
Well, if you don't make it, then I get the $3,500 back
the
anyway.
$3,500 comes back.
Yeah. So.
There we go.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see if it works out. Let's see. We're at 13. Okay. All right. There it is.
All right. So you just saw Hasan chip in. He's fully in on the campaign. So let's keep it going. Let's keep it going, chat. Who's going to chip in? Whether it's $1,
now
$10.
It makes it a little bit easier to beat Michael from Pennsylvania's ass. Okay. So as I was saying, and I want you to talk about this real quick while I go pee because you can just yap for hours and it's great. So I feel comfortable leaving you alone on stream. But the question I have is, your district apparently is very gay.
Yes.
It's a very queer district. What are some of your policies in terms of protecting queer people in your district? And I'm going to go pee while you explain that because I'm a foe.
Yeah, so I'm going to just set the context here. Based on the 2020 census, based on the largest proportions of LGBTQ households in the United States, among large cities, San Francisco was the largest with 34 LGBTQ households per 1,000. Fort Lauderdale in our district in Broward County was the largest medium-sized city in terms of proportions of LGBTQ households, more than San Francisco at 42 per 1,000. And Wilton Manors, Little Wilton Manors, which is a small city that is nestled in the heart of Broward County, 213 households per 1,000. It was, I believe, after West Hollywood, the second city government in the United States of America's history to have an all LGBTQ city council. And so for me, I'm unapologetically a trans ally. I'm standing up for LGBTQ rights against Ron DeSantis and against the Republican administration in Washington, D.C. Jared Moskowitz is a twice appointed Ron DeSantis Democrat. When Ron DeSantis has attacked the LGBTQ community by attempting to remove pride flag street art from Sebastian Street on Fort Lauderdale Beach, Jared Moskowitz has said nothing, but I've stood time and time again at Trans Day of Remembrance at the Pride Center at Equality Park in Wilton Manors. We've stood with the trans community. This is just who I am. I'm a first-time candidate, so this is not me having some preconceived notion of electability or what it means or how it works with my coalition. This is just who I am. I love the LGBTQ community, my trans friends and family members. This is what we need. This is what our district needs to stand up for trans liberation and to really not only just pass the Equality Act, but to be able to throw a punch back when Republicans use the trans community as a punching bag and Democrats are so willing to saw off this part of the coalition. When we had Sarah McBride, the first trans member of Congress that wasn't even able to have a speaking slot at the 2024 DNC, the Democratic Party feels like it is ashamed for having some parts of its coalition, whether it is the Palestinian community, whether it is the trans community. I'm proud to have this as part of our campaign coalition, and communities like Wilton Manors and like Fort Lauderdale deserve, in the highest representation LGBTQ congressional district in the country, we need an outspoken champion, a trans ally. Jared Moskowitz has thrown the trans community under the bus time and again with the last two National Defense Authorization Acts that have these poison pills to attack trans rights. Trans rights are civil rights. Trans rights are human rights. And when trans rights are under attack, all of our rights are under attack. And we need someone who's going to stand up and be able to throw a punch back at the Republican Party, because at the end of the day, when Republicans try to fearmonger and try to take these small exceptions, what is really a minutia of the American populace at large, but use it to fearmonger, they're really distracting from their efforts to cut billionaire taxes. We're on track to have 5 trillionaires within the next decade, according to Oxfam International's report at the beginning of 2025. And so when we see attacks on the trans community, it is an attack on all of our civil rights, but also it is a red herring so that Republicans can stoke the culture war and fight the identity politics fight so that they can continue to completely rig the economy and fuck working people over. And so to stand with the trans community is to stand with the working class. It is to stand with labor unions. It is to stand with every marginalized community that this Republican fascist administration is attacking. So I'm proud and I'm unapologetic because, again, these are my friends. This is my community. This is who I hang out with. Before I was ever running for office, when I was just an organizer, this is the community that I grew up with. This is the community that I spend my time with. This is the community that when we were just in Washington, D.C. before coming out here, this is the community that I stand with because they're ultimately my friends. And I think so many Democrats, because they don't know any trans people and they don't associate themselves, it's like a foreign entity or a foreign object that they don't really understand how to relate. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we all have the same common aspirations and interests to be able to love and be loved, to be able to have our civil rights respected, to fully express ourselves in the promise of what American democracy is. And so if we're going to have a party that stands up for all of us, it cannot be a party that bites its tongue when it comes to fighting for trans rights. So I will never, ever, ever back down. I would drop out before I had to ever compromise on this position, because to compromise is to fail. To compromise is to give up and to say that civil rights are only for some of us. And that's just not what I'm in this for.
Okay,
Win, lose, or draw.
But have you considered that when Donald Trump banned 59 trans athletes from participating in NCAA competitions, rent went down by half, and so did the grocery prices. Like, it just, affordability was no longer even a concern for every American because he did that.
Yeah, I mean, as a shameless plug here, as a former college football player, I was a defensive end for the Sewanee Tigers. Someone can check the stats. I did have some stats when I was in college. This is not something that I ever thought about of the sexual orientation or gender identity of the people I played with. Or I went to a small school, so much of the student body were student athletes, and there's a shared affinity and a solidarity because it's demanding when you're spending 30 to 40 hours a week. There's a great Deadspin article written that profiled me when I was a senior called "The Future of College Football is the University of the South." This is right. They're not bringing down the cost of rent when they attack the trans community. Yeah. It is a complete culture war. And people like Riley Gaines that use their own experience as a college athlete to attack trans rights and to try to prop themselves up and make themselves into a cause celeb of the far right. It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting and shameful. And we need to actually address the cost of living and bring down the cost of rent. And it is not happening by attacking the trans community or the immigrant community or the Muslim or Palestinian community. These are all red herrings. The divisiveness of racism, of misogyny, of xenophobia, of Islamophobia, they're all red herrings to distract you from the class war that is happening, because it is out and out class warfare that we're seeing right now with the highest levels of income and wealth inequality in American history, even worse than the 1920s.
Getting back to specific policies around foreign policy, around military intervention, how do you believe the genocide in Gaza and U.S. military intervention around the world ties back to domestic policies here at home?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I mean, when we see ICE that is murdering Renee Good and Alex Preddy and Keith Porter, these are tactics. And also, it's not just the fact that they are now murdering with impunity people in the United States, but it is then the propaganda machine that gets spun up after the fact that these are domestic terrorists. And certainly what is happening right now in the West Bank under cover of this war that the United States and Israel have started with Iran, it is turbocharging the settler violence that is going on in the West Bank. Yeah. So when ICE is trained by the IDF, when U.S. police departments are trained by the IDF, they're bringing these tactics back to be used on the American people. What we're willing to tolerate in Palestine is a test for what we're willing to tolerate in the United States of America. When we saw Pam Bondi a few months ago as these ongoing illegal military strikes, just mass murder of people off the coast of Venezuela and in the Caribbean and the Pacific, Pam Bondi says we're going to do to Trinidad or the gangs in the United States, we're going to treat them the way that we treat the cartels. And when they're bombing the cartels, they're manufacturing the consent for these kinds of military actions, this level of impunity and state-sanctioned murder within our own borders. And we're going down a very, very, very dangerous path. And it begins and ends and is tied in with U.S. support for the Zionist colonial apartheid regime that has racial apartheid in Palestine. When Ta-Nehisi Coates went over there and he comes back and he says, it's actually, as a Black American, very, very familiar to see based on which streets you can go down. I mean, there are sundown towns in the West Bank. There are streets that you cannot go down based on your ethnicity or based on your religion. So in Florida, we had a teenager, Muhammad Ibrahim. He was 15 years old when he was kidnapped by the IDF from his bed, from his family's home in the West Bank when he was there visiting relatives. He was kidnapped along with a few other teenage boys. He was incarcerated in Israeli detention for about 10 months. He lost, I believe, a third of his body weight. He contracted scabies. He could not see his family. He turned 16 years old in Israeli prison. While he was detained, his cousin, Seyfullah Musalet, who they're both U.S. citizens, Florida residents. Seyfullah, 20 years old, worked at his family's ice cream shop in Tampa, beaten to death by Israeli settlers, who then barred the ambulances from administering care to him. And when we look at what happened to Renee Good, what happened? ICE blocked emergency care from going and administering aid. They're so parallel, and it's so chilling.
Because it's fascism. It's fascism in Israel, and it's fascism in America. It's a domestic military occupation, and some of the techniques and some of the propaganda is damn near identical. And I think a lot of Americans are starting to recognize that these are the exact same struggles that everyone is experiencing. So one last question I have for you is about AI. AI is actively replacing workers. Unfortunately seen as a mechanism to displace the existing labor force and not one that actually lifts the burden of the working class. You yourself were replaced by AI at your job just a couple of years ago. How do we make sure the economic gains of automation are also felt by the masses who will be most directly impacted by the layoffs?
Yeah, I think one, and maybe just to tie it back to the previous question, AI and surveillance technology that is used and piloted and tested in Palestine is now applied within the United States. And with AI, and what we're seeing now is the kind of second stage of there was first the automation of the kiosks in restaurants and the kind of impersonalization of no longer having to interact with someone because you could just place an order and have working class jobs automated away. But now this is affecting white collar workforce. It is affecting people in information technology, coders, marketing jobs. And what it is accelerating is an economy where there are fewer and fewer people controlling more and more capital and more wealth, and the workforce becomes expendable. And when the workforce is more expendable, it is easier to control them. It is easier to bust labor unions. It is easier to undermine labor protections because of the precarity that AI creates in the global job market. So we need to really have, I think, to bulwark against that, one, some universal economic rights and guarantees. We need, it's not just Medicare for all and universal childcare and paid family and medical leave and free college. We need people to have a stake in the economy. And when we look at something like Meta and what Facebook does, where they literally profit off of, we are the product that is being sold. When our browsing habits, when our social media engagement is used to be packaged and sold off to advertisers, that is our data. That is our own personhood that is being packaged up and sold off for profit. And so I think we need to look at public ownership of big tech. We need to have structures where people are compensated for their advertising habits, their browsing habits, where people can receive a dividend from the tech industry. This also with AI, we see it affecting the news media. I was a former member of the News Guild, and we just saw the Washington Post lay off so much of their workforce, and it's being replaced by AI, and that comes with faulty fact checking. It allows for the propagation of misinformation and disinformation, and so we need public entities and public structures that can counteract that to protect careers in journalism, and to really protect against AI is not perfect. It is rife with errors. It is rife with its own the biases of the people who create it, and so it can replicate at scale a lot of the inequality that we see within the economy. So we need to have protections against AI. We need a moratorium on data centers. We saw the absolutely disgusting usage of AI by the Cuomo campaign to have that kind of AI generated hit pieces against
racial agitprop. It was insane.
Yeah, I mean,
Idris Elba
robbing
a CVS with a keffiyeh, wearing a keffiyeh, psychotic.
So AI also affects creators and independent content creators. It affects. We saw the Writers Guild strike last year or 2024. Because as more and more of these mergers occur with basically there being one big movie and television production company. That's the end objective of so many of these mergers, and they're trying to take creative jobs out of the workforce and just automate it into AI. But there's no creativity involved there. It's all downstream and derivative of human ingenuity, and so that cannot be replicated. But there's going to be more slop, and so we need to, for political misinformation and disinformation, political propaganda purposes, to put a moratorium on the development of new AI data centers. It is one of the most destructive aspects of the environmental resource extraction that we're seeing with just the water usage that the demands of these AI data centers draw from, and that raises people's utility rates. So there has to be a moratorium on AI data centers. It has to be banned in terms of the national security state apparatus that's used to surveil people and to, again, it just brings in the biases of its creators, and it can be used to suppress people's civil rights, constitutional rights. And what needs to be there in replacement is investment in labor protections, strong unions, and ultimately we need to remove the private ownership of so many of these big tech multi-billionaires, because they're using this AI technology to very nefarious ends. And if we do not put a stop to it now, and if we do not bring it under state control, then we're going to see really a dystopian future where people are expendable, and there will be more impoverishment, more homelessness, more people being laid off. And ultimately, the very few people who benefit are going to be in greater and greater control of the economy. So we have to put a stop to that.
Yeah. All right. Two final questions. I lied. I said last question, but two final questions. One, there's a candidate that's running in the gubernatorial race by the name of James Fishback, I believe. And he is America's not first, but hopefully last Groyper candidate. He has engaged in a lot of racial animus in his campaigning, but also outside of that, one thing that he's been able to take advantage of is the information vacuum that exists on the left, especially as it comes to issues like Israel and Palestine. Now, while he is an anti-Semite, or at least like leaning into anti-Semitism, even though he was a big Barry Weiss fan not that long ago, weirdly enough, I feel as though the only reason why Republican candidates can take advantage of, or the Republican candidates can technically, quote unquote, lead on issues like Gaza, is because of the lack of momentum that's coming from the Democratic Party. How do you seek to address that messaging vacuum on the left?
Yeah, I believe it has to come with, Fishback, when it comes to ending state investment in Florida, in supporting the state of Israel, when he talks about putting a moratorium on AI data centers, when he talks about banning private equity from home ownership in the state of Florida, these are all policies that are used to kind of wink at bring people in from the left. And it's a tactic that fascists have used time and time again. Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016, he talked about how he was a different kind of Republican, how he wasn't going to touch Social Security or Medicare. And that was the permission structure that many voters needed to hear from him in order to support him. So what Fishback is doing is filling a vacuum, as you said, within the Democratic Party, because when Democrats we just saw AI come to the rescue of Valerie Foushee in North Carolina's 4th District. It was not without more than $1 million that Anthropic invested at the very last minute to defeat Nida Alam So Democrats, this is tied in with the corrupt nature of the campaign finance system. When I spoke a little while ago about Jared Moskowitz being funded by Lennar Homes, a corporation that also invests in the Republican Party. But as long as Democrats are tethered to a corrupt campaign finance system that is backed by corporate PACs and by special interests that they rely on to sustain their office, to sustain their campaigns, to be a bulwark against leftist challengers, then the Democratic Party is going to remain susceptible to the fascist right co-opting the language of universal economic benefits. And what Fishback is doing is taking these terms and then he's turning it in a jingoistic way, and he's saying Florida is full, and H1 Byron, that Byron Donalds, the Trump-endorsed Republican who he's running against in the Republican primary. Fishback is then pivoting on that and saying we have to ban all immigration, that he does go further with banning U.S. Financial aid to Israel in a very anti-Semitic way. So if Democrats are going to fight back against that, then we have to divorce ourselves from this corrupt campaign finance system. And I think that's why it's so important that it's not just me running in this district. There are Democratic Socialists running all across the country with this shared platform. And I think what is so important to me running as a Democratic Socialist is there is a fidelity to an organization and there's a fidelity to a platform that is not what so many Democrats use to just say, well, it's the political entrepreneurship of I'm just the right click on the dial. I've got it just right. And there's this kind of broad expanse of views that Democrats can have to allow themselves to take this corrupt AI money, to continue to be funded by AIPAC, because they say that it's kind of uniquely what their district needs or represents. So we need to divorce ourselves from the corrupt campaign finance system if we're going to expose James Fishback, because he's not fighting for every single Floridian. And I think that is the key difference. He's fighting for what he conceives of as the kind of the American people, and that everyone else, if you're an immigrant, our district, 30% of people born outside the United States, they're not welcome in James Fishback's Florida, and they're not welcome in the fascist Republican Party's United States of America. And so the key difference is that when we talk about banning U.S. military aid to Israel and banning U.S. government bonds, or U.S. municipalities and governments investing in Israel bonds, we're talking about universal economic benefits. And I think it's the universality of our platform and our message that is characteristically distinct from what Fishback is talking about, because he's just got his preconceived notion of what it means to be an American. Yeah. And you're either in the in-group or you're in the out-group. And that is a classic fascist tactic that goes back for a century.
And people like James Fishback would not be taken seriously at all, or would not have any room to message around Israel if the Democrats were actually leading the pack when it comes to this issue. Like, there's never... My policy on this is like Tucker Carlson, when he was at Fox News in the 2016 era, was one of the only mainstream resources that was actively talking about labor rights and centering labor in his commentary. It was very obvious that it was cynical, but the reality of the matter is he won... he got much more he gained so much more popularity as a direct consequence of being the only person who was addressing this aspect in mainstream news. And the same thing happens with politics in general. It's the people like Moskowitz or many other Democrats that refuse to be the leader on this issue, even though it's like unimaginably popular, that allow Republicans to come in with anti-Semitism and try to steer the conversation in that direction, even if they don't actually want to do any of those things that they're claiming that they want to do. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic. I believe we raised around almost $50,000 in the short period of time that you were here.
Let's go. Thank you, everyone.
$49,000. What else can people do to give one more shout out? When is your election, and how can people help out with your campaign if they liked what you were promoting here?
Yeah, www.oliverforcongress.com. Our Mobilize is synced up right in our website, so you can find our phone banks, which are virtual, and you can join them from wherever you are in the country. Our canvassing, which is happening in both Broward and Palm Beach counties. We're canvassing every Saturday and Sunday. I think with this amazing financial windfall, thanks to you, Hasan, and all the HasanAbi heads, we're going to be able to bring on a full-time field director. And so expanding our canvassing operations to every single day of the week, I think we're going to be able to open a field office. But oliverforcongress.com, you can find us on Mobilize to plug into those volunteering events. We also need, I mean, Jared Moskowitz has his own meme army with the Midas Touch Network, with ACYN, with Aaron Rupar, who when Jared is in committee and he's wearing the Justice for Cricket pin, or when he's making fun of Kristi Noem and, of course, distracting from his own complicity in voting for the Laken Riley Act, he's got his backers in social media, and so we need a countervailing force. And so just speaking out about the campaign, creating your own content, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, or on Twitter, we really need to show the country who Jared Moskowitz is, because in that 3-minute video, I think that did a perfectly good job of illustrating who this person is. And he is a Republican. If he were not running in Broward County, Florida, the most Democratic county in the state, he would be a Republican. And so we need the social media engagement. If you are local and also want to write letters to the editor of the Sun Sentinel, of the Palm Beach Post, of the Miami Herald, or Miami New Times, we need to build a media presence, because again, I'm a first-time candidate. I'm doing this for the very first time. I don't have any previous public office held or any previous campaigns for office. And so we need to get the word out. If we get the word out, we will absolutely win. So it is just a matter of resources, and it is a matter of being loud enough and spreading the word. So anyone you know in Florida, in South Florida's 23rd District, in Broward and Palm Beach County, please join and get them involved in our campaign, get them to vote for us. Also, if you live in the state of Florida, we have, because Ron DeSantis has called a special session on redistricting, any registered voter in the state of Florida can go on our website, www.oliverforcongress.com. There's a link to a petition on the top page of the website. You can sign that petition and send it into our campaign P.O. Box. We need 2,564 petitions, and fundraising is important. Hitting this 2,564 petition mark helps us save $10,440 in qualifying fees, a ridiculously high number that really is a barrier to entry for so many working class campaigns and candidates. So if we hit that 2,564 petition goal, we can save over 10 grand in qualifying fees, and put that back into our field organizing, put it back into our advertising to reach people. So that is another thing. If you live in Florida and are a registered voter, it doesn't matter if you're a non-party affiliated voter, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, live inside or outside of the district. If you're a registered voter in the state of Florida, you can sign that petition, send it into our mailbox, and that will help us save that money and get ballot access. Our primary election is August 18th. The voter registration deadline, despite the petition threshold being open to voters of all party registrations, Florida is a closed primary state. You must be a Democrat to participate in our primary. That deadline to register as a Democrat in Florida is July 20th of this year. So you must be registered as a Democrat by July 20th if you live in our district, if you want to vote for our campaign in the primary. So I'm asking you to please register as a Democrat. If I can be a Democrat, as I'm a Democratic Socialist, then please join the party so that you can participate in our election and help us make it past Jared Moskowitz, because we've got a very tough election against whatever Republican candidate that comes forward from that race. This is an NRCC targeted district. It is one of the closest districts in the state of Florida. And if we can win this race,
I know you can win the primary, but once you win the primary, it's over. I think like a candidate such as yourself is going to absolutely cook in the general and have a far better shot at thoroughly defeating any Republican that is placed in front of you, because your message is universal, as opposed to just like leaning into the partisan backing and leaning into the Democratic brand and leaving it up to like a potential marginal victory. You're actually leading first with your policies, leading first with your worldview that is universal, that is much more appealing to a broad base of support.
Yeah, and when we win this race, when we win the general election, it is going to change the nature of American politics forever, because our message has, for so long, it has been cowed and couched in, this is only possible in the deep blue districts.
Yeah.
This is only a kind of politics that can be espoused in deep blue New York City or deep blue San Francisco or Los Angeles. When we win this race in South Florida, in the heart of anti-socialism, anti-communism, of reactionary foreign policy, it is going to change the character of American politics forever. And it is going to open up the terrain for candidates like me to run all across the country, because that is what we need. When I worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016, I worked in states like Kansas, in states like Utah, where there was record-breaking turnout. I spoke at a rally in Utah in front of 17,000 people. You would not imagine that level of popularity for the Democratic Party in parts of the country like that. But working class politics, democratic socialist politics, the universal economic message, irrespective of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, that is truly the unifying message that people of all stripes in America can get behind. And so when we win this race, I think it is only going to propel us into Congress and propel more and more working class and DSA candidates into Congress and into state and local seats as well. This is really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think this is the moment where we have to change. We have to change as a country.
Think about how awesome it would be to own Matt Iglesias, who is one of the greatest purveyors of this idea that like Democrats need to moderate. Like all of the, in your mind, close your eyes and think about the shittiest New York Times op-ed writer and the shittiest third way Democrat, neoliberal Democrat, and how they consistently advocate for this pivot to the center, for this mythical moderate voter, because we have to win purple districts, we have to win red districts, okay? If Oliver wins, or when Oliver wins, all of that argument, those arguments fall apart. It's over. It's gone. And you know, I do believe that you have a much better shot than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 33 years old. This is what our generation, millennials and Gen Z, this is what we believe in. And that transcends party. It transcends party, and it is really the only way that we move forward as a country. So I really appreciate you sharing your platform with us and having me on, inviting me out here. This has been awesome. Love everyone in the chat, all the love that we've been seeing. I've been trying not to look too much and get distracted, but
no, you've been killing it. You've been yapping. Yeah, we've reached over 52,000 in donations now.
Best fundraising day of the campaign. Let me emphasize that. This has been, thanks to HasanAbi heads, the best fundraising day of the campaign. This is probably about 20 to 25% of the total fundraising that we've had for this entire race. We've already been in the top 12% of primary challengers when it comes to our fundraising. We've already been competitive. This is going to put us over the top. We have, in the last week, I think we're closing in on $100,000, which is about double what we've raised up to this point. So this has been really, really incredible and shows the power of just people, ordinary people all across the country. We have the power to take on these entrenched corporate interests in APAC, and we're going to kick their ass on August 18th. I truly believe if we have the resources, and thanks to today, we're getting a lot closer. It won't be close. If we have the resources to reach people, I don't want to oversell my expectations, but you saw how bad Jared Moskowitz is. This is not what people want, but we've been so cowed and depressed into thinking that this is all that is possible in Florida. But a better world, a better Florida is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for coming on. This was wonderful.
Appreciate it, Hasan.
All right, and I will, when I'm in Florida, I'm going to see if we can link up, and maybe I'll link you up with some of my Florida friends as well that live out there possibly in your county, as a matter of fact.
Hell yeah.
Let's
do it.
Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah, let's do a photo. Here, I'll turn on.